It was a big night for the PFL in Saudi Arabia as 6 new world champions were crowned at the 2024 PFL World Championships. The Russians dominated in Riyadh, but they couldn't stop dangerous Dakota Ditcheva walking away with a championship belt of her own. Welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and this is the last word on the PFL 2024 World Championships, which took place this weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The Mayadeen playing host to a stacked card of events. It was actually 2 finales on the same night. We had the PFL MENA finale, the very first season of PFL MENA, which has been, I think, pretty successful from what I can make out for the PFL in that region, building stars. Certainly the crowd reaction to the fights was pretty good. But that all played as the hors d'oeuvre, the appetizer, if you like, for the main event itself, which was, of course, the PFL 2024 finales. And we crowned 6 new world champions on fight night. One of them was a Brit. And let's dive straight in there. The co-main event, Dakota Ditcheva versus Taila Santos. This was expected to be the biggest test for Dakota Ditcheva's MMA career. She's built her way up very gradually. She went into the PFL Europe season and absolutely dominated, just decimated the field to win the PFL Europe Championship. The doubters were still out for Dakota, however, and they were like, well, she's not been in there with truly world-class opposition yet. Let's see how she does in the PFL Global season. Well, the answer, pretty damn well. She made it all the way through the season. She made it into the playoffs. And then in the final, she faced the most seasoned fighter that she's seen standing across the cage from her in her mixed martial arts career. Taila Santos has challenged for the UFC flyweight world title in the past and is as tough and as durable as they come, has been in there with the best of the best, and no one had been able to finish her until this past weekend. Dakota Ditcheva, absolutely superb performance as she goes in there, absolutely takes Taila Santos apart through the first round, dominates her in the second round. There was a moment when Santos got a takedown in the first round and Ditcheva just had to be a little bit smart, a little bit patient. Did really well, actually. Her takedown defense in general was on point. Her defensive wrestling was outstanding. I think that's to be expected when you spend that time over in American Top Team there in Coconut Creek, Florida. And she really showed how much she's rounded out her game. But the difference maker for Dakota Ditcheva is her striking. There is nobody at her level, certainly outside of the UFC, arguably maybe even in the UFC. Her striking is that good. And the way that she just broke down Taila Santos, who, as I say, never been beaten before or by stoppage, and just punished her to the body. And that is the secret sauce to Dakota Ditcheva's wins, I think. Yes, she's got the spectacular strikes, those nasty push kicks to the face, and obviously is more than capable of landing big strikes to the head area, but it's the body snatching that is getting Dakota Ditcheva these wins. She's really ripping people to the body. She's picking them apart from range, landing lots of head strikes, lots of leg kicks. But what she really loves and where she really shines is when she steps into range, she steps into those knees, and then she starts to rip the body with punches. And she broke down Taila Santos brilliantly and finished her in the second round to capture that flyweight world title. Amazing performance from her. It was a nice touch from the PFL to let her mum, a former world champion in Muay Thai, present the championship belt to Dakota. And the big question now, and it is a big question, is what on earth does the PFL do with Dakota Ditcheva next? Make no bones about it, this is a big problem for the PFL because she's been in there with the best that they have to offer at 125 pounds, and she's just beaten them all. She's been in there and run the table and captured the flyweight title. This is not a division where they've got super fights queued up waiting for her in the PFL Super Fight Championship. You know, just step her up and say, right, okay, you get to fight this person now. Those fights are not there. And this is a problem. And Dakota was like, I'm sure the PFL will sort me something out. And I'm sure the PFL want to, because she's a star for them. She's an absolute superstar for them. And it needs to be said as well, the first British female to capture a major MMA world title on the world stage. And, you know, a little bit of history there as well for Dakota Ditcheva. She joins the likes of Liam McGeary, Michael Bisping, Leon Edwards, Tom Aspinall. You know, these guys have been in there and won titles. And, of course, Brendan Loughnane, who we will talk about in a minute. But that was a huge performance from Dakota Ditcheva, who, in winning, has actually made the PFL's life a lot harder than if she'd have lost. Because if she loses, there's the automatic redemption story that they can pick up in 2025. But she won, and she stopped Taylor Santos. And there really isn't a whole lot out there currently under the PFL banner to really challenge her. She can step in, you know, she can maybe get in there with the likes of Liz Carmouche, who I think stylistically would provide a very difficult test for her. But beyond that, there really isn't a huge amount. So it'll be very interesting to see how the PFL books her in 2025. I think they could probably stretch 1 or 2 fights out, but beyond that, there really isn't a whole lot out there for her. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what Dakota's contract situation is like, and whether winning the title activates some sort of clause that extends her deal. But we're getting already, after 1 year on the global stage, we're getting to a stage where Dakota Ditcheva is outgrowing the PFL's 125-pound division. So we'll see what happens in 2025. But an unbelievable performance from dangerous Dakota Ditcheva, who adds to a growing list of British world champions in mixed martial arts. And what a performance it was. Right, we mentioned him just then. Brendan Loughnane was in action in the main event against Timur Khizriev for the featherweight world title. This was a really, really interesting matchup on paper. Brendan, the more experienced guy, the former champion, of course, 2022 PFL featherweight champion, against Timur Khizriev, who had fought in Bellator a couple of times, moved into PFL, undefeated at 17-0 heading into the fight, but got all of his wins by decision. And I was looking into that fight on the way in, and I thought, okay, he's winning these decisions. He's grinding out decisions. He's very good everywhere. But Brendan's very seasoned. Brendan is someone who has got the ability to finish a fight. His game planning is excellent. And I felt that if Brendan was at 100% and was really on his game, that he would give Khizriev a little bit too much to deal with. And I thought he would either beat him on the scorecards or maybe even claim a late stoppage, as Khizriev decided to sort of open up a little bit more in trying to chase the fight. Fight did not go that way at all. First thing we need to say, Timur Khizriev is the real deal at 145 pounds. He's good everywhere. His striking was sharp and on point, very accurate. Didn't waste a lot of shots. Really, really good technical striking performance. You know, there's nothing too out of the ordinary. A couple of spinning back kicks, which I'll talk about in a second. Actually, I thought that was very interesting the way he deployed those. But the way that he was using his striking arsenal was very considered. It wasn't, everything seemed to have a purpose, and his wrestling, of course, was dominant. And the key was in the first round where he took Brendan down and Brendan could not get back up. And that was a bit of a statement. Brendan is outstanding if he does get taken down at bouncing back up. Just go back and look at his win over Bubba Jenkins in the final 2 years ago. He shut Jenkins down completely. Just completely shut him down. And that's a top draw American wrestler. Khizriev, obviously, a different type of wrestler. This Dagestani style of wrestling is very different. But Brendan just couldn't do anything about it. And watching the fight, and it was mentioned on commentary, they're definitely, and this is not to detract from Timur's victory at all. He deserved that fight. He was the better man on the night, without doubt. You know, I think he may have won this fight anyway. He looked that good. But Brendan did not look 100% in that fight. And I don't know what it was. It was mentioned in the fight that his right leg was wasn't quite, but behaving the way you would expect it to. His mobility certainly was not what you would expect, certainly from a lateral side-to-side perspective. He was just kind of relying on moving in, moving out. There wasn't a lot of side-to-side movement. There wasn't a lot of lateral movement, sort of moving away from some of those attacks from Timur. But and it meant that Brendan was a static target for a lot more of that fight than you would normally expect to see from him. He's normally perpetual motion. He'll stand there, pop, 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 move, pop, 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 move again. Didn't really do that. He wasn't able to put his combinations together like he normally does. It was sort of one shot, maybe a 1-2, but not too much beyond that. And he didn't look 100% to me. And I'm sure, you know, he's not someone who comes out and makes excuses after fights. He's a proper sort of fighter's fighter. He the first thing he did after he won was he went after he lost to Timur, straight over, gave him his props, congratulated him. And even in his post-fight interview was, you know, at pains to congratulate Timur, making sure that he got the deserved sort of plaudits, if you like. But then you sort of look at Brendan's performance, and the thing that we saw from him was what we would always expect from him, is that just insane levels of toughness. He was never going to quit on himself in that fight. He was never going to just say, look, I'm behind the 8 ball here. I haven't got my full arsenal available to me for whatever reason. You know, let's just stop it between rounds. He wasn't going to do that. He just fought from minute 1 to the final bell, gave everything that you would expect from him. And, you know, you just go back and look at his performances. Just look, he's been through some absolute wars in the last few years in the PFL cage. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. His performance against Bubba Jenkins in the final 2 years ago, for me, is one of the best performances, if not the best performance we've seen from a British fighter in a title fight on the world stage. I thought, start to finish, the man was absolutely superb, and he still has that in him. It's not like Brendan Loughnane has lost it. He absolutely has not lost it at all. What he did seem to have was a dodgy wheel, right? He looked like he had a problem with his right knee, or there was a problem with his right leg. His mobility was not there, and it restricted him a little bit. But nonetheless, he still fought through, made it to the final bell, made sure that Timur Khizriev earned his title, which he absolutely did. So yeah, credit to Brendan. I'm sure we will see him back. In what form, I don't know, because I think the plan may have been to win the belt here and then just focus on the PFL Super Fight Series, maybe move up to that. I don't know what appetite there is, having done it for like 4 or 5 years now, what appetite there is for Brendan to go back into yet another grueling PFL global season. So we'll see. Maybe he'll jump in there and do some of the, you know, step across and do some of the Bellator branded events. I don't even know if they're going to be branded Bellator now. They're Road to Dubai now, I think they're going to be called. Maybe he'll go down that route and look to get some individual fights and just pick and choose some interesting fights on those non-season cards in 2025. I think that would probably make sense for him. But yeah, he's been an absolute star for UK mixed martial arts, and represented Manchester with absolute distinction inside the cage. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in 2025 free of the burden of having to fight in a season, because it is a different beast. If you're fighting in a season, you know that you're in camp, you fight, you maybe get a week off, maybe 2 weeks off, you're back in camp again pretty much. The turnaround is pretty grueling, it's pretty quick. Whereas if Brendan only needs to fight 2-3 times a year in 2025, you know, once at the end of Q1 or beginning of Q2, once in the summer, once in the autumn or the winter, you know, that allows him more time to prepare himself, to get himself in full fighting shape. And I think we'll see a better Brendan Loughnane. We've seen a pretty incredible Brendan Loughnane in the season, but I think we'll see an even better version of Brendan Loughnane if he's freed from the burden of having to compete in a grueling PFL season. So we'll see what happens in 2025. I'm looking forward to it, though, because cards on the table, he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. Remember him when he first stepped into the tough smashes as just a kid, and now here he is as one of our most distinguished fighters in UK MMA history, and flies the flag very, very well for our nation. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how he goes in 2025. A word for Timur Khizriev. I mean, he looks like the real deal at 145 pounds, the complete package. I mentioned the spinning back kicks, and this is something I wanted to mention in there. It felt to me almost as if he was trying to draw out a little bit of Brendan's ego. And Brendan's not an egotistical fighter, but I know that Brendan really fancies himself as a striker, and I think he rates his striking up against anybody that he'll stand opposite inside the cage. And for Timur Khizriev, who predominantly known for his wrestling ability, to be standing in there in a final against Brendan, who is known predominantly as a striker, and to be throwing spinning shit at him, I think could almost be described as mind games. And I've seen it happen in fights before where a fighter will throw a technique and then immediately the opposing fighter will throw exactly the same technique back. This sort of mirroring thing. It's like, that's not how to do it. This is how to do it. And it was one of those where Timur landed a really good spinning back kick to the body. And I think that the fact that it landed was a statement. The fact that he threw it was a statement. And I think the fact that he threw it was probably the biggest statement, to be honest, because it almost looked like Brendan looked at it and went, hang on a minute. I'm not letting this guy do this. I'm going to show him how to throw a spinning back kick. Threw a spinning back kick. And it was almost like Timur Khizriev knew that this was coming. This was part of the game plan. We're gonna sort of lure this technique out of him, because by nature of the technique, you are rotating your whole body to throw this kick. It gives you more time to react and to shoot if you know it's coming. And as soon as he turned his shoulders, Timur had already started changing levels, and he managed to shoot straight in onto his standing leg, got the takedown, and that was in the first round. Happened again, I think, in round 2 or round 3. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and it was an interesting little note, and I thought it was a real sort of snapshot of the psychology of that fight. I think they were trying to lure that technique out of Brendan because it gave them, for a guy who's got such good takedown defense, I think they identified that as perhaps the biggest opening that they could take advantage of to get the fight to the canvas. And it worked for them twice in the fight. But really smart game planning, brilliant technical performance from Timur Khizriev, who just covered all his bases brilliantly. And 150-45 scorecard, 2 49-46 scorecards. He is the PFL Featherweight World Champion for 2024, and he's $1 million richer. And I'm really looking forward to seeing who can step up and challenge this man in 2025, because I still think there's a fair bit to go in Timur Khizriev's skill set. And that was a huge performance to close the show on a big night for Russian fighters at the PFL 2024 Championship Finals. Let's take a look at the other big results at the PFL 2024 Championship Finals. Turkmenistan now has a world champion mixed martial artist. Dovletjan Jagshimuradov defeats Impa Kazanganaya via first round knockout. 58 seconds was all it took. And clearly, Dovlet decided, we're not going to bother with a feeling out process here. We're just going to step in and throw some hammers. And he hurt Impa early and just kept pushing, throwing big shots. And as I say, 58 seconds, stunning performance, big knockout, and picked up an enormous win in his career. I remember when he first came into Bellator, no one really knew who he was. And the thing that really marked him out, two things. One, he's got the most magnificent beard you've ever seen in a mixed martial arts cage, just real sort of weathered, you know, a guy looks like he's been out in all weathers in that beard and has sort of suffered some real hardship in the outdoors, sort of just getting battle tested and battle hardened for the cage. But the other thing that struck me was just how tough this guy is. You know, he's solid everywhere. But against Impa, well, I thought he might try and wrestle Impa. No, he went straight in there and just started throwing leather and big shots, big knockout victory. And, you know, a huge win for Yagshimuradov. The other three winners on the night, all Russians, all Russian. It was a big season for Russian mixed martial arts. Shamil Musayev, TKO's Magomed Umalatov. That was going to be a Russian winner no matter how that one turned out. But it was Musayev who got the win. to claim the welterweight world title. Midway through the third round, good competitive fight, but Musayev just finding that extra power in the third round and getting the job done, dropping his man with a big shot and then finishing him on the ground. Great performance from him. Excuse me. Gadzi Rabadanov defeating Brent Primus via second round knockout. Primus, of course, former Bellator lightweight champion. I think his best chance of victory was always going to be on the canvas. Rabadanov knew this, and was able to light him up on the feet. Did all right on the ground as well, to be fair. Managed to shut down Primus's wrestling. Showed some good mat skills of his own, but the fight was won on the feet. And Rabadanov just absolutely lighting up Primus, and great performance from him. He is the 2024 PFL lightweight world champion, and the first fight of the main card, an emotional win, I think, for Denis Goltsov. He doesn't look like a man who shows a lot of emotion, but I think he probably would have been quite emotional after that fight, because he's been in the PFL every year, pretty much, going for the heavyweight title. Never quite managed it. This was his fifth time of asking, in there against Oleg Popov, who I think was on a 17-fight win streak, and I think he was the betting favorite going into this. And it didn't look good when Popov took Goltsov to the mat. Goltsov, predominantly known for his stand-up. Popov just took him down, top position, and it didn't look good for Goltsov. And then, almost out of nowhere, throws the legs up, locks up a triangle choke, teased an arm bar for a minute there, switched back to the triangle, and chokes Popov unconscious. And it was a great way to kick off the World Championship main card in Riyadh. Brilliant performance from Goltsov, who had the commentators a little bit concerned at the end, because he immediately took his gloves off, and it was like, is he going to retire after all this long quest to win the PFL heavyweight title? Now he's completed that quest, is it now game over for him? Has he sort of mission accomplished, I'm going to walk away? No, he is not. He's going for Francis Ngannou. He wants to fight Francis Ngannou for the super fight world title. It's a fight you can book. It's a fight that makes sense if you look at it from a promotional standpoint. Under the PFL banner, it's the PFL season champion against the PFL super fights champion. The dots join up there. But as a sellable contest, Goltsov is not someone who moves the needle in any way. And that's not a criticism of him as a fighter. It's just a statement of his drawing power. So will they do that fight? If they do, I would imagine they do it early in the year so that Ngannou can then move on and they can look at a much bigger fight in the summer. But we'll see. I mean, I think from Goltsov's side of the bargain, he's earned it. He's been through the season. He's done the hard yards. He's done 5 years in the PFL. Finally wins the title. The only way has to be up for him. I mean, surely he's not going to come back and do another season to try and retain or defend. It doesn't make much sense to him. I think he needs to get out of the division now. Or sorry, get out of the season format now and fight bigger fights. And doesn't get much bigger under the PFL banner than Francis Ngannou. Let's see if they book it. I would imagine the PFL will want a bigger box office fight than Francis Ngannou, Denis Goltsov. But as part of a wider card where maybe you've got a lot of names on there, you could maybe throw that one in. So we'll see how they book it in 2025. Let's quickly wrap things up with the PFL MENA season. Abdullah Al-Qahtani stopping Marwan Balagui to win the featherweight title. Omar El Dafwari, this was an incredible finish, defeating Mohamed Al-Akra via a flash knockout, really, early in the second round. And Al-Akra was kind of knocked out and then woke up and was livid that the fight had been stopped. He had been knocked out. There's no doubt about that. And El Dafwari sort of really putting the flag down for Middle Eastern MMA and saying that, they've got a lot of talent coming out of that region. He's certainly one of them. That was an impressive performance from him. The female star of Saudi Arabian MMA, Hatan Al-Saif, getting a second round TKO finish against Lilia Osmani. Ali Taleb, who anybody who's watched the PFL Europe season will know him. coming out of All Stars Gym over there in Stockholm, Sweden. Was a contender in the PFL Europe bantamweight season. Didn't quite make it to the actual championship itself. Didn't win the title. He did in PFL MENA. And boy, did he do it in style. Huge knockout of Rashid Al-Hazumi. And Ali Taleb is $100,000 better off and has a championship belt on his shoulder. Don't know what they're going to do with him next year. Would he go back and have another go at PFL Europe? Could he compete on both and try and win 2 regional titles in the space of a year? I don't even know if that's legitimately feasible. Or does he look to try and earn himself a spot on the global bantamweight season, having fought in 2 of the PFL's regional seasons and done pretty well in both? How will he do on the global season? He's certainly explosive enough to be someone who is going to be well worth watching if they do put him up there and have a bantamweight global season next year. So look out for Ali Taleb in 2025. PFL MENA lightweight title goes to Mohsen Mohamed Saifi. He outpointed George Eid via unanimous decision. I think they might be training partners, those two. There was a lot of respect before and after that fight between them. And that was the first PFL MENA championship crowns. That's a little bit of pub trivia for any MMA quiz fans out there. Mohsen Mohamed Saifi, the very first fighter to capture a PFL MENA championship. And he did it at 155 pounds, and he did it by unanimous decision. Had a few showcase fights further down the card. Some familiar names to European fans. Mansour Bonawi defeating Alfie Davis via 3rd round submission. Slim Trabelsi defeating Abraham Babli by split decision. Gabriel Braga, former global season finalist and winner, I think, taking on and beating Jeremy Kennedy. Bellator striker Asel Adjuj getting a submission finish of Jose Perez. And in the opening fight of the night, and a bout that may have put him in a title fight next, Costello Van Steenis, longtime training partner of Gregor Mousasi, the Spaniard, an absolute savage, goes in there, knocks out Hal Dantas via head kick KO 48 seconds into the first round, and immediately called out Johnny Eblen. That is a fight I would like to see, because Costello Van Steenis has been there or thereabouts at 185 pounds in that Bellator division, and we'll see how that one goes. I think they could book that for a Super Fights title in 2025. But you know what? That was a decent night of fights. I know the PFL gets some stick sometimes for the format. Sometimes they get some stick for the pacing. But what I would tell you is that the fights really delivered. The fights really delivered. It was a fun night of fights to watch. I do wish that they could do something about the atmosphere at these events sometimes. I think having it, I understand why the fight event was in Riyadh. I understand this. But I also think that in a more raucous crowd, it would have just taken the whole event up a level. But it's difficult. I mean, arguably, having it in the Middle East when you've got so many Russian fighters on the card, it probably gives you as good an atmosphere as you're going to get, given the amount of Russian fighters on the card. But if you could imagine there's a couple of French guys in there somewhere in that global season, and you held the finale in Paris, different level. Maybe you got an Irish fighter or two on the card. You put it in Dublin, different level in terms of the atmosphere. So we'll see how all that pans out. Big things coming for the PFL in 2025. They've announced they're going to Dubai. They're going to be holding events in Dubai. And Paul Hughes is going to be challenging Usman Nurmagomedov for the Bellator lightweight title. That will be an absolute banger. But as of this past weekend, PFL World Championships 2024, bangers are plenty on this fight card. Really enjoyable fight night. Great performances. 6 new world champions crowned. And one of them being one of our own. Dakota Ditcheva walks away as the PFL Women's Flyweight World Champion. That's all we've got time for on the RDX Sports Podcast this week. You can follow me across all the socials at Simon Head Sport. You can follow RDX Sports across the socials at RDX Sports on X, at RDX_sports on Instagram. And we will have another podcast for you later this week as we start to build up to UFC 310, the final pay-per-view event of 2024 for the UFC. And there are some absolute crackers on that fight card. But we'll talk about those later this week. Until then, enjoy the start of your week, and I'll speak to you a little bit later on.